thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to be here, everyone. Glad to see people here. This is I think this is my 6th time speaking at the Arizona Spinal Injury Association. It's a blast every time, and I hope that you get something out of this. Now, to be honest, I'm used to being there in person and interacting with people. I prefer in-person speeches, but obviously with the pandemic going on, we are over Zoom right now. But I do encourage want to type in the chat, or if you have any questions, to let me know, because I do like to have it a little more conversational than just a lecture. I have a lot of information to present, hopefully not too much. 2 hours is a long time to fill, but I want to make sure that what I offer today, that it's something that you can use to make your health better. Share my, Is there a way to share?
Yeah, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, it's kind of over to the right. It'll say share screen.
Okay, we could do that. All right.
There you go.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Dr. Kelly Clough. I'm a naturopath. I don't know if you've heard of naturopath before. I know some of you have. Naturopath is basically a combination between, we do some allopathic medicine, some conventional medicine, but we also do a lot of holistic medicine. So can prescribe most pharmaceuticals, read labs. But on the other hand, what I really like the most is dealing with diet, exercise, supplements, herbs, and acupuncture. Those are my favorite things to do. And so we straddle the fence so we can treat diseases, but also build health from the inside. Because in my experience, in my opinion, if you want to build health, it has to start with diet and basic fundamentals of living healthy versus just taking pills and medicines. Hippocrates, considered the father of medicine over 2,000 years ago, said all disease begins in the gut. I don't know if you've heard that before. I don't know if I would fully believe that all disease begins in the gut. That's a pretty big statement to make, but I definitely agree that a lot of disease, and particularly chronic disease, starts in the gut. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how the gut plays a role in health and in disease. And it's not just about gut health, and it's not just about gut symptoms. A lot of people that I talk to think that if they're not getting gas and bloating or constipation or diarrhea, that their gut is healthy. But a lot of times, either A, the symptoms are below their awareness, or that they're having symptoms, but they don't know it yet. We'll talk about that later when we talk about diet diary and tracking symptoms. Sometimes we don't notice when our gut is having issues, either because we're not paying attention to the gut, or because there are other symptoms like pains or other more serious diseases that are taking our focus. So in my experience, gut is not only very serious, but it can also be overlooked as far as causing potential issues throughout the body. The themes for today, because we're going to talk about a lot. We have 2 hours to talk. The main themes that I want you to take from this are that gut issues can affect the entire body, the physical body, but also the mind and the brain. And I want you to have a sense of what you can do about it. And there's some things that you can do on your own based on what you eat. And we'll talk about herbs or spices or teas that you can have, but also when to seek help. Because obviously it's, while I am a huge proponent of a healthy diet and lifestyle, treating yourself completely is not a smart idea either. Now, if you recoil at that statement and think he's just trying to drum up business and get patients, don't go to me then. It's really about being safe. I don't even treat myself for everything. And so knowing the difference between living a healthy lifestyle and taking care of yourself, which is the fundamentals, really the foundation, but also seeking help, because some herbs and treatments are best done with a licensed physician, or at least some sort of health practitioner. We have 3 basic parts to this speech. Number 1, we're going to talk about normal and abnormal gut function, what it's supposed to do and what could go wrong. Number two, part two, we're going to talk about ways that the gut links and is connected with the entire body, because again, it's not just about the digestive system being separate from everything else. It really connects to every other part of our body. And then part three, we're going to talk about things that you can do to support and maintain gut health. All right, part one, normal and abnormal gut function. Basic overview of the digestive tract and digestive system starts in the mouth, chewing, swallowing down the esophagus, and then in the stomach, that's where there's a lot of acid, so the food is going to be broken down. So the first part of digestion of the digestive tract is for digestion. And digestion is two parts. You have mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is the chewing and pulverizing the food into small pieces. The tongue plays a small role in that as well. And that's to break apart the food into tiny chunks, and that aids in the chemical digestion. So that's the first thing. I don't have it written down later, but to make sure that you chew your food properly and fully, because that's going to aid with the next part, which is the chemical digestion. And if we don't break down our food, we're not going to absorb it. Starting in the mouth, but also in the stomach, and then the first part of the small intestines, where a lot of the chemical digestion occurs. And that's where enzymes and acid is going to break apart the bonds of the food so that we can absorb it, which is the next step. Because our body isn't going to take in big, long chains of nutrients or food. It has to be broken down into really, really small pieces. So that starts mechanically and then chemically with the enzymes. That's going to, now if that happens properly, now you're going to have a better chance at absorbing. And we'll talk about some situations that can happen where even with proper digestion, that absorption may be an issue, which is going to occur. A lot of it's going to be in the small intestines, but then into the large intestines as well. What you eat isn't in your body yet. It's only in your body once you absorb it. Because if you think about it, your digestive tract it's within your body, but it's not inside your body yet. If you don't absorb it, it's just going to pass right through you, right? And so in order to make it in your body, in your blood, where that it can be incorporated into the cells and be used by the body, it has to be absorbed. And there are a lot of cases where people will eat food and they may be eating a healthy diet, but their body isn't either not breaking it down properly or not absorbing it properly, so they never get to make use of it or actually make it into the body. So the body has to digest, which is breakdown, and absorb the nutrients. Otherwise, it really never makes it inside, even though it's within your physical body. It hasn't actually been incorporated into it. At the other end of the tube, we have elimination, very important process. The digestive system not only takes in nutrients, but it releases waste. Part of the waste is just what we eat. We don't break down or absorb, and so it just passes through the other end. We'll talk about fiber and how important that is. But we also release bile and stuff in the bile that we need to eliminate from the body. So elimination is also a very important part of the digestive tract, and we'll talk about how fiber plays a crucial role in that, making sure that we are regular in eliminating. Another thing that the GI tract does is protection. And most of our immune system resides in the GI tract. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You're taking things into your body that, yeah, food, I mean, you're going to have nutrients, but it also may have bacteria, viruses, fungi, and the body needs to make sure that none of the bad stuff is making it. Now, not all bacteria are bad, we'll talk about that. But if the bad stuff gets in, now you have an infection, it could be really bad. So being that the gut is a really important interface of the outside and the inside environments, there's going to be a lot of a protective role within the gut to make sure that we stay healthy and we don't have some sort of pathogen invade our body. Let's talk about some things that can happen when the gut is not working properly. One thing that's really important that we're finding more and more about, and there's going to be a tremendous explosion of science coming in the next years and even decades, I believe, in the role of the microbiome. So the microbiome are the healthy bugs that live within us. Now, it's not just in the gut. We also have healthy bugs that live on our skin, in our mouth, in our lungs, different areas. But the gut microbiome, particularly in the large intestines, is the one that is the most studied, arguably the most important, and where most of the bugs that are within us live. We have a infographic next about how there are about 10 times as many bug cells, microbial cells in our body than our own human cells. So on a number basis, we are outnumbered by microbes. Now, it may sound scary and dangerous, but these bugs actually, they keep us safe, and they also allow us to function properly. So when we have a balanced and healthy gut microbiome, and I gave a 2-hour speech just on this at the Arizona Spinal Cord Injury Association last year, the year before. There's a lot we could talk about, but it's a lot of heavy science, and this bug does that, and that bug does that. We'll talk about it in real basic terms because I think that gets the job done just as well. In basic terms, what we want out of our microbiome to stay healthy is to have enough of the good bugs, and those are going to help keep out the bad bugs, which we want to keep the bad bugs out. And even maybe more importantly is a diversity of the good bugs. When we start to lose diversity, where it's all of one type and there isn't enough of a variety of the microbes within our microbiome, then the community is not as strong. Our microbiome garden is not as strong or resilient. It can't perform all the functions that it needs to perform. And then we are more susceptible to disease, whether infectious disease, but also chronic disease and just poor function. And we'll talk about just eating a healthy diet. And we'll talk about some elements that go into supporting the microbiome. Now, the microbiome and what we'll talk about a little bit next, and some things that can go wrong with digestion, these all relate together. So they're not necessarily separate things. They tend to come in clusters, just like diseases. Chronic diseases tend to come in clusters. Like you'll often see obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease together because the chronic diseases, they have similar factors that play a role in what causes them. We'll talk about the immune system and the role that the microbiome plays. So the healthy bugs, they're living on the outer surface, we'll say, of the gut tube. So within the opening of the gut tube. And then these red cells, those are the lining cells. Those are going to control what enters the body and enters the blood and what doesn't. And then on the other side within is going to be the immune system. So the first thing that anything that we eat, the first thing that it's going to see, even before it sees the cells, are going to be the healthy bugs that are living essentially on top of those cells. And those cells are going to modulate what's going to even make it to our gut cells, but it's also going to do some metabolism. It's going to start breaking things down. And so what is living on the surface of our gut lining is going to play a major role of what makes it in our body and what it looks like when it makes it in our body. So 100 trillion microbial cells, about 10 times more than our own human cells. 95% of the bugs within us are in the gut, in the GI tract, although we do have, like I mentioned, microbes living all over us, really. And genetically, only about 1% of the genes within us are human genes. The rest are microbial genes. And so a lot of the functions, the metabolism, what's created in our body is related to the bugs that are living within us. And we all have different bacteria. There are major classes of bacteria that we all tend to have, but we'll have different signatures. So some people have more of one type of bacteria, or they may be missing something else. And so we all have a unique signature of the bugs within us, kind of like we have our own unique fingerprint. And there are patterns, but we have unique microbiome, and the bugs living within us can change over time. Now, big changes to the core of our microbiome usually happen over long periods of time, but we can have hourly changes based on what we do that day, what we eat, who we're around, whether we're traveling or not. There are a lot of factors that play a role. And so the good news is that our gut is constantly molding and shaping and adapting to what we do. So when we start to incorporate healthy foods, healthy activities, healthy mindsets into our life, we can start to make immediate changes. And a lot of that's going to happen through the microbiome. Some of the stuff that the bugs within us do, they're going to keep microbes, unhealthy microbes out. One of the things that happens if once antibiotics are used is that they can leave the body open to what are called secondary or opportunistic infections, or that now that it may have been necessary to kill bad bugs, but if the antibiotics also kill the good bugs, which they often do, now those good bugs aren't around to keep out the bad bugs. And now some other bad bug that normally wouldn't have taken hold has a place where it can flourish and cause an infection. Clostridium difficile is one of these infections. It's a really nasty one. It's an opportunistic infection, but probiotics and implantation of fecal probiotics is one of the ways used. Mayo Clinic has a article on it on how to treat C. diff infections. Put the good bugs out, put the good bugs in, it'll keep the bad bugs from populating and taking hold. Another thing that these bugs do is they make a lot of stuff. They make short chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate is really important for immune function and signaling. The microbiome also makes vitamins like vitamin K, other nutrients like biotins and B vitamins. They make a lot of stuff that we need. And we, not just for nutrients, but also for proper functioning, immune functioning, nerve functioning, and just proper functioning of the gut, which we'll talk about how it leads to proper function throughout the body. The bugs also affect the genes and the proteins and the way that our cells, the way that they express the genes. It's called epigenetics. Our genes are really important. The genes are our blueprint of all of the proteins and enzymes that we make, and they are our blueprint of how we turn out. That's our genotype. The genotype then leads to the phenotype. The phenotype is how you look, what your health is like. Basically, how do the genes turn into you? The you, that's the phenotype. And what we're finding, and research has found that the genes, they don't always turn into stuff. A lot of the genes are off. And genes can be turned on or turned off based on diet, based on lifestyle, but also based on the microbes that are living within us. So the microbes can turn on and turn off genes. Some of the genes you want to turn off because they would lead to bad outcomes. Some of them you want to turn on because they're necessary. And one of the ways that this plays a really important role is how the bacteria within us can modulate our immune system, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Because if our immune system isn't regulated correctly, then we start to get allergies and autoimmune conditions. And it's a surprise that it would be bacteria within us that would keep our immune system in check. It doesn't sound like bacteria would help our immune system, but that's what makes, part of what makes them healthy bacteria. some of the things that the human microbiome is associated with, some diseases, metabolic syndrome. So it includes hypertension, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cardiovascular issues, could be blood sugar issues, obesity, which is another one, irritable bowel diseases, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, liver disease, whether alcoholic liver disease or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Some, if there are new infectious diseases, again, you're going to be more prone to infection if the microbiome is unhealthy, but also a history of infection is going to affect the microbiome. So sometimes we catch bugs and we get infections. That's going to affect the microbiome whether you have antibiotics or not. If you get antibiotics, it's going to do an even bigger number on the microbiome. But once the microbiome is damaged, if it isn't replenished, whether with foods or with supplements, then now the body is more prone to a future infection. Diabetes, also related to the microbiome, and atherosclerotic plaque. And this is just a small list. There are more and more things that are coming out. And this is something that's been studied for a few decades now, but really it seems to be exploding as far as the science that's coming out, and more studies are being done. And I think they're going to keep finding new conditions that have associations. This is even the complete list. They're going to find more and more associations between chronic diseases in the microbiome, which is going to further strengthen that connection and further vindicate that quote at the beginning that disease starts in the gut. And even if it's not 100%, the percentage is getting higher and higher as we go along. And I expect that to continue. We're nowhere near at the end of what the science has uncovered when it comes to the microbiome, still in its infancy. Related to the microbiome and the health of the gut overall is something called leaky gut. I don't know if you've ever heard of leaky gut before. Some of you probably have. It is essentially what it sounds, where the gut is, it doesn't have, it's leaky. Now keep in mind that this is something that there's still some controversy around it. People still debate, what does that mean, leaky gut? And did the leakiness start or did it cause issues? A better term is intestinal permeability. And when the intestinal wall is not tight and connected, then things can leak through. And that's called increased intestinal permeability. And that's a real thing. The term leaky gut can, I guess, trigger some people, but intestinal permeability, there are studies on this. And by the way, if you ever want to have my sources for this, I do keep the sources, or at least the citation. So I'm happy to send that over if you want to read the studies. But I'm trying to keep it simple here as much as possible. But you can see here on the left side, we have what connects these gut lining cells. These cells are lining the gut, the inside of the gut, and they're keeping things out, within the inside of the gut, keeping it from entering into the blood. And it's only allowing things through the cells that it wants to let in, like nutrients. And they have these things called tight junctions that keep them together. Now, whether due to inflammation or infection or not eating good foods or things entering the body that are toxic, inflammation can occur, the cells can swell, and the tissue within them can also swell. And those tight junctions can be damaged or affected in a way where that now they're not so tight, and there's a gap that can form between the cells. And that gap can allow things that aren't supposed to be absorbed into the body, can allow pathogens, bad bugs into the body, can also allow food particles that haven't been fully broken down. Those can lead to food allergies. And this coincides also with, if you're not breaking down your food properly and it gets into the body, it gets within the cells, the immune system doesn't like that. The immune system doesn't like to see unbroken down chains of proteins or carbs that have made it into the body, because to the immune system, it looks like it might be an infection. And so that's when people start getting more inflammation, because the immune system it's on its guard now. It's thinking that there's an infection, got to respond to it. And then people can start getting food allergies and food sensitivities because their body has developed a response to the food. And it's not always necessarily the food's fault. Yes, there are pure allergies where people are just allergic to peanuts, and then they have been and they always will be. But other people develop food sensitivities, which will be different than an IgE. We're talking more different types of sensitivities, where that they'll eat a food and they'll have some sort of immune response, or they may get tingling, they may get rashes, they even may feel their throat start to close up a little bit, and they may develop this from eating foods that become exposed to the immune system. And so a lot of things can happen if the gut is not working properly. And a lot of it starts with inflammation. With inflammation, you'll often get immune issues as well, because inflammation is one of the main mechanisms of how the immune system functions. The immune system functions by creating inflammation that helps it heal, but also helps it respond to threats. But when you have out of control inflammation, what else is going to happen? You're often going to get, you can have a greater chance of autoimmunity, of allergies. Those are both inflammation driven, and chronic diseases. A lot of chronic diseases. Most chronic diseases are linked to chronic inflammation. Generally a low grade inflammation, not like an acute inflammation. Like if you hurt yourself, you bang your knee or something, and you get that acute inflammation, that's different than the low grade chronic inflammation. The low grade inflammation is insidious. You may not notice it, but it's something that over time leads to worsening issues. Because acute inflammation is great. Without inflammation acutely, we couldn't heal. It's part of the healing process. But if that never turns off, then we never resolve the healing, and we actually lead to more damage over time. And it's a slow and steady damage that occurs. Some causes of leaky gut: non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin, ibuprofen, Aleve. Those are going to cause damage to the gut. If you're taking really big doses, it can cause a lot of damage right away, but even small doses over time can affect the gut's ability to repair. Stress puts us in a fight or flight response, and our gut heals in a rest and digest response, which is the opposite. So sympathetic is when we feel stressed, and when we're in a sympathetic state, our digestion isn't getting proper blood flow anymore. Because when we're really stressed, at least the way that we evolved, it's probably because there's a threat, and we need to respond to that threat before we can consider digesting our food. Because if we're in the jungle and something wants to eat us, we're not concerned in that moment about what we're eating, because we want to not be something else's food. So when we are in a fight or flight response, sympathetic dominant, our digestion is not getting the blood flow that it needs to properly heal and repair. Now that's okay in small doses. We're actually meant to be in a fight or flight response sometimes. And having stress can be good for the body, but just like with that low grade inflammation, if that stress never goes away, then we can't get into that rest and repair state. And then over time, our bodies they break down. They can't ever repair themselves. Smoking, excess alcohol use, other things that can damage the gut, and intestinal dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the microbiome. So if the microbiome isn't healthy, part of what those bugs that are living there do is they keep that's their home. They clean it up, they keep it nice. They keep the environment in a way where that they want to live there. If those healthy bugs aren't there, then it can lead to damage to the intestinal wall and barrier, and now the barrier isn't working as well. A lot of the same things will cause damage to the microbiome, but we also mentioned other drugs, including antibiotics. If you kill those healthy bugs, then you're going to want to replace them. Otherwise, something else might move in that isn't as nice as the probiotics. We can see here some things that leaky gut, and there's, like I mentioned, there's a lot of overlap between this and the microbiome. If we look at the lungs, COPD, obviously a major class of lung issues, congestive heart failure in the heart, depression, schizophrenia, autism, Alzheimer's disease, and chronic fatigue syndrome, all linked to intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability. Celiac disease, that's obviously a big one. That's the main issue with celiac disease is the gluten. The body has an autoimmune response to gluten. It's attacking the gluten and it causes damage to the small intestine cells and just flattens them. So now there's no barrier there and stuff can just leak in and out, and it's really bad. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, which has a very strong link to stress and worry. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and also some liver issues, as we've mentioned. Another thing that I've noticed, and I'm calling this digestive insufficiency. This is just the way I'm phrasing it. This isn't like a medical diagnosis. A lot of people I notice have digestion which is impaired and seems in a way sluggish. Their digestion just isn't working well. And this can present in various ways. Sometimes it's gas and bloating. They eat and their gut swells up, made physically see how much that their stomach bloats after they eat, or they just feel gas and they're either burping or flatulence. Or they may notice they have undigested food. Some people will go as far to say, it looks like it's coming out the same way it's coming in. In that case, definitely want to chew more. But it's also showing that the body, for whatever reason, is not chemically digesting the food properly. Sometimes it feels like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when you eat something and you feel like it's just a rock sitting in your stomach and it's just there and it's not moving. I've had a few cases of this, waking up and just like, oh my God, is that still there? I ate hours ago and it just feels like it's sitting there and doing nothing. That's another example of what I would call digestion being sluggish. And this can lead to, again, allergies. It can lead to poor appetite. Some people, they eat and they can't eat that much before they get full. They get full right away, but then they get hungry because their body needs more nutrients, but they can't seem to take in much food without getting full or nauseous because their stomach isn't working properly to handle it. Fatigue can happen, nutrient deficiencies, which could be leading to the fatigue. So if your body isn't breaking down the food, then it's not going to enter the body. Remember, it's very important. You have to digest the nutrients, the food, to get the nutrients and to absorb them. And if you're not getting those nutrients, you're not going to feel good. And a lot of things can happen from that. And part of that are nutrient deficiencies. So some people eat enough and they may even be eating healthy food, but if it's not entering their body, it's not doing them any good. It's not just about what you put in your mouth. It's about what's being absorbed by your gut and making it into your body. And one of the phrases is, you are what you eat. But it's really, you are what you absorb. That's a big part of it. So if you're eating something but you're not absorbing it, that's going to affect everything that is you. Everything that your body makes, it needs to make it from something that you took in. Now, this may be caused by low stomach acid. That happens as we age. We tend to make less stomach acid. People that are on proton pump inhibitors, like Nexium, that's going to decrease the amount of acid produced, and that's going to inhibit chemical digestion. We need a big part of the acid in our stomach is going to help us digest protein. And what the acid does is it takes the protein, which is all coiled up, and unfolds it so that the enzymes can chop it up. If you don't have enough acid, it can interfere with that process. There also may be deficient pancreatic digestive enzymes, an exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. That's another thing people have, but these tests are that you can do a stool test, the low stomach acid. There's a capsule you can take. It's not particularly easy to test. What I see is that some people, well, one example is some people will take hydrochloric acid capsules and they feel better and they digest food better. Well, that's a good sign that that's what they were dealing with. And if they're feeling better, that sometimes that's even better than doing a lab test, which can have a false positive or a false negative. These are things that generally I look at symptomatically. And if it seems like their digestion is weak, I have my own things that I'll do, a lot of herbs and spices. We'll talk about those in a little bit. And if they seem to be digesting better, which you can notice based on their symptoms, how they're feeling after they eat, how are their bowel movements. And then also down the line, again, you may see changes in certain inflammatory processes, rashes, allergies, maybe even autoimmunity. Those are the results that we're looking for. And in Chinese medicine, I like to incorporate the Western and the Eastern. Chinese medicine talks about warming digestion. They talk about the spleen, which is the meridian for digestion, obviously a different function than the Western medicine, what the spleen does. But the idea of warming digestion and turning the digestion on, I think of it like a fire. If you put wood, if you want to get warm, you don't just need wood, you need the fire burning as well. And the gut is that kind of furnace that's creating, that's burning things metabolically and providing what we need. All right, any questions on part one? Just normal function. We're going to get into some connections to other aspects of the body. Okay, so let's talk about just a few things of how the ways that the gut links to the body. We've already talked about some via microbiome issues and leaky gut. We've talked about some diseases and some organ systems that can be affected. We're going to talk about three just a little bit more before we get into some of the things that you can do about it. Big one is inflammation and immunity. So as I mentioned, around 80% of the immune system can reside in the gut, underneath the gut cells. They're waiting, they're watching, they're making sure nothing enters the body that shouldn't be in the body. Because if it gets in the body, gets in the blood, that's really bad news. Our immune system is there. And so any sort of gut issue, if we have a gut issue that is affecting the immune system or causing inflammation, that's linked with inflammation throughout the body. Because you start turning on the immune system in the gut, it can turn it on throughout the body. And of course, like I mentioned, big role in chronic diseases. The microbiome, those healthy bugs, those probiotics that live in us, those promote maturation and normal development of immune cells. So our immune system develops alongside the healthy microbes that allows them to perform properly. And even after we develop, even when we're adults, our immune system is regulated by those healthy bugs via the inflammatory, they call them cytokines, which are just inflammation signals. The bugs are influencing the signals that are produced. They produce signals and they also affect the signals produced by the immune cells, which will affect whether the immune system is turned on or it's turned off. And it's not necessarily an all on or off thing, but whether it's in a heightened state, in a hyper state, whether it's a little more calm and not responding to everything with inflammation. And so our immune system really requires a healthy gut, which involves the microbiome, but also the integrity of the lining and also the how well we digest food in order for our immune system to perform properly. Because as I mentioned, if you're not breaking down the food properly, if you eat some food and it's not digested completely, and you have these large proteins passing through the gut, maybe the gut's a little bit leaky, and so the immune system gets to see it. it's seeing these large proteins and wondering, this might be an infection. We need to attack it. And so then inflammation's created and antibodies are produced and your body is in fight mode. And when it's in fight mode, it's not in relaxation and recovery and health mode. So major connection with gut and the immune system, and the immune system has widespread effects throughout the body. Lactobacillus and Bacteroides are some species of those can decrease that low-grade inflammation that can lead to chronic issues. By toning down the immune system, we have some regulatory T cells. T cells are a group of immune cells, and some of them are going out and killing bad cells, but some of them are more the managers, and they're looking out to see, okay, what's going on. And some of these are called regulatory T cells, and they're going to keep the inflammation at bay. The immune system may be really gung-ho and want to go out and fight something, and then the Treg cells say, oh, hold on, let's slow down, let's calm down, we don't need to do that. And in some cases, we need that. We need that in cases of allergies and autoimmunity. Inflammation is really good in some cases and necessary, but it can be really bad in other cases. And we always need balance. And that balance will not exist if we don't have a healthy gut and we don't have a healthy microbiome. And also dysbiosis, again, that imbalanced microbiome is found with those with inflammatory bowel diseases, but also, again, other inflammatory conditions. Rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory condition, also associated with microbiome changes. Next, we have metabolism, how we break things down and how our body functions biochemically. This involves things like our weight. They found in one study with mice where they could transfer the microbiome of one mouse to another to affect its metabolism and its weight. If they took the microbiome from an obese mouse and transfer it to a mouse of normal weight, they would turn that mouse obese. And it's affecting not only the metabolism, but it could also affect the food cravings as well and the food desires. Because certain bacteria like different types of food. Some like longer chain carbohydrates, some like more animal fats and proteins. So based on what's living within you, you may have different desires for food because those bacteria want to eat, and they can create signals within us to make us do their bidding. It's pretty wild when you think about it, how much we may not be in control of our own bodies and how much the bacteria may be running the show. To what degree, we're still finding out. Obesity is linked to a decreased overall bacterial diversity. So as mentioned, you want the good bacteria in, the bad bacteria out, but even of the good bacteria, you want to have diverse bacteria. If you only have one type, or if you don't have enough of a variety, then it's not going to be as healthy. And a lot of that comes from diet and lifestyle versus pills and capsules. With diabetes, bacteria like Prevotella copri and Bacteroides vulgaris can induce insulin resistance, which is the major mechanism in type 2 diabetes. Didn't want to include a lot of the specific bacteria, in part because I can't read most of the Latin names, but just a sense of there are specifics and we're learning more and more about them. But I'll be honest, in my opinion, in a lot of cases, it's not necessary to know the specific strains. If you're keeping a healthy community, you don't have to micromanage it in that degree. And if you do, you'd really want to work with someone. It affects the metabolism of proteins and amino acids. I mentioned produces the short chain fatty acids like butyrate. So, these are nutrients we need within our body, which will affect our function. And also other nutrients like vitamin K, big role in clotting, biotin, important for the skin, and B vitamins, which do a whole host of stuff. And so without our gut, we're not going to be able to perform our necessary functions. And then lastly, mental health. This may come as a surprise or maybe not. I remember when I was a kid, I had no sense that digestion or food could play any role other than just weight. I didn't even know at the time that it could affect things like energy levels, concentration, sports performance. I wish I had known. If I did, I would have definitely had a much cleaner diet when I was younger, because at that age I would do anything for a leg up in sports. But the idea of what we eat affecting our brain and our mental health is something that may surprise you, or it may seem obvious, but it's something that has not been accepted until, I would say, more recently, where even the standard doctors and the mainstream medical field is recognizing that digestion, nutrients, and mental health are intertwined. Sometimes they'll call it the gut-brain axis. Some of the things, again, this list gets really long. The point of this is not to tell you all the ways that the gut influences mental health and affects the function of the brain and the emotions. It's not to go over everything. It's just to give you an idea of some of the highlights. But know that there's a lot of information about this, and I'm sure much more will be coming out. One of the things that can happen is via activation of the immune system. You can get activation of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is one of the nerves that goes to the brain and can cause relaxation. It's part of the parasympathetic pathway. Autism spectrum disorder associated with altered gut bacteria. Another study with mice where they found that by altering the gut microbiome, that they could induce autism-like symptoms. And in my experience with kids that have developmental issues, a lot of times they have gut issues as well. Very common for kids with growth deficits or birth deficits to have also gut issues. And when you address the gut, sometimes their mood and behavior can change drastically. Major depressive disorder, also stress and anxiety, have a link to the microbiome and certain bacteria. And given that inflammation plays a major role in depression and mental health issues, that's another way to connect it. So even just based on the inflammation connection, and that's got a connection to these mental health issues, that's kind of more of an indirect cause, but there also seem to be more direct causes as well. So it's not even just one connection. There's a lot of ways that the gut affects the mind. And what I've noticed is that it's something that people don't necessarily give credence to at first. But as you become more aware, some of you may already be there, where you know that what you eat affects your mood. I mean, we know that if you go too long without eating, most of us have our mood affected with that. The term hangry, if you're familiar with that, hungry and angry. But also the quality of what you eat. I know sometimes, if I eat the wrong thing, I eat something that's not healthy, I may not feel right in my mind. I may feel foggy. I might feel even irritable, or I might just feel tired. And there's could be different mechanisms or reasons for that. But while I used to not give it any credit, and I know other people don't give it credit, as you build awareness and start to notice the difference or the changes that can happen from before and after you eat something, then it starts to really stand out. And then over time, you develop this sense of how big an effect what you eat will affect your mindset and just how you feel in general. All right. Good timing. This is the fun part, I think. This is where we talk about things you can do to support and maintain gut health. And a lot of this is going to be focused on what you can do. I am all about empowerment. I definitely acknowledge, and there's a very important role for seeing your physician and health professionals. Very important. We can't do it all ourselves, and it gets complex. Because even when we're talking about healthy things and nutraceuticals and nutrients, they can affect pharmaceuticals and they can affect diseases. And there's a reason why med school is so long to complete, because there's a lot to know and a lot to understand. Knowing what's going to impact things, knowing what's a really bad sign, what could be an okay sign, and just a lot to be aware of. So I'm big on empowering people, but I also want to say that I think there's a time and a place, right? And another thing that I'll say is one of the things that I've noticed is some people, if they get on the supplement train, where they buy a supplement every time they hear something that sounds good, maybe they hear it on some TV show or they watch a video or read a blog, and then oh, that sounds like it's for me, and they buy a supplement. Some of these people end up with a whole drawer, cabinet full of supplements, and a lot of times they're not even taking them. They may be taking them, they may be taking 15, 20 supplements, or they just have a whole cabinet of half-filled bottles because they started taking it, but then they weren't really sure why they were taking it, or they're not really noticing if there's a difference. And then they can end up spending a lot of money on supplements, and some of them may not have been necessary in the first place. I'm a huge proponent that supplements should supplement a healthy diet and lifestyle. They don't replace it. And there's a lot of things that people can do I love getting people off of medicines, but also I love getting people off of supplements as well. And sometimes people will be taking certain supplements for, over long term. And people will a lot of times be taking some sort of supplement. I mean, I take various types of supplements. I rotate, but I wouldn't say I take a lot. And that's the ideal state, is to not have to take a bunch. Sometimes that's where you're at, and that's okay. But I'm a minimalist. What's the least amount of supplements that you can take and be healthy? Because if you're taking a whole, some people walk in with a whole huge bag full of supplements that they take every day. And my thought is, I want to take you off of as many of these as possible. And I'd rather you get it in your food, because we're all got to eat, right? Everyone's got to eat something. But are you eating things that are making you healthy, or eating things that are making you sick? If you're eating things that are making you sick, then you're going to have to take supplements and take meds to make up for it. But if you eat things that make you healthy, maybe you don't need that anymore. And furthermore, if you are eating healthy and you have good fundamentals, health fundamentals, then not only do you not need as many supplements, you may not need as many pharmaceuticals, you won't need as many treatments. It doesn't always eliminate them completely, but at least reduces them. And I'm a big fan of that. Start simple. Simple dietary tips. Got 5 here for you. Very simple stuff. Number 1, eat whole foods, mostly plants. And when I say whole foods, I mean like an apple or grapes or broccoli or, bread, rice, whatever it is that you're eating, a whole food, not something that's processed. And mostly plants. I am not anti meat products, and just like anything else, time and a place. But I do think that in general, people don't have enough plants. And we'll talk about fiber. Fiber is one of the really important nutrients that plants have. And if you're not eating enough plants, you're not going to have enough fiber. And fiber helps us with our bowel movements, making sure things are eliminating. And fiber also is food for our microbes. So eat whole foods, mostly plants. If you're doing that, you're on a really good start. Number 2, and this goes along with number 1, minimal processing or additives. So the more something is changed, altered, processed, the more stuff that's put into it or taken out of it, it's not a whole food anymore. It's turning into to borrow a phrase, a frankenfood. Something that's been altered and changed in some way. It's not in its ideal state. And I'm a big proponent of the notion that we evolved over time, right? We evolved around foods and to make best use of the foods that were around us and not what we were eating. And we made some really big changes to what we eat. And it's if you take a food that usually has a whole bunch of parts to it, like let's say fruit, that has fiber, it has fruit sugar, but it also has polyphenols and other antioxidants, those work together. So for example, the beta glucans in apples, those will limit the amount of sugar that's absorbed in the gut. It'll slow down absorption of sugar in the gut. And we know that if your gut is absorbing sugar too rapidly, the blood sugar is going to spike and insulin is going to spike, and that can lead to insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. And so built into the apple are beta glucans, which can slow down the absorption to help us not get diabetes, essentially. Yeah, it's not necessarily for us, but we evolved around it. Now you take away the fiber and the beta glucans and you just provide the sugar from apple, well, it's not an apple anymore. And now you don't have that same synergistic effect. Now you have a lot of sugar. You might be spiking your blood sugar and causing issues down the line. So that's why I talk about the minimal processing, whether taking things out or adding things in. If you have something that doesn't usually have sugar, and now you put sugar into it, well, now there's something, an extra thing that it didn't have before. And if it's something that's for taste or other preservatives that may not be healthy for us, they may be in some doses healthy, but not in that dose or not in that balance, or in some cases they're just not healthy at all. Now you can take something that may have been healthy and now it's not healthy anymore. And so seeking things out that are minimally processed. Ideally, we all have gardens and we just pick it out of the ground, pick it off a tree, wash it off and eat it. Well, that's not realistic for most people. That's not the way things are going to happen. So, you do the best you can. And as much as you can eat it in the whole food form, where you start with, a fruit, a vegetable, you cook it up, you eat it, versus getting it out of a box or a bag or a can. It's just going to be, it's going to be better. It's going to be a good habit. And there are ways to do this so that it's not as difficult or time consuming. It can be, but also with good habits, you can do it in a way that is easier and doesn't take up all your time. Terms like organic and no added sugar, generally good terms. I tend to seek them out, but they can also be misleading. So organic and no added sugar doesn't necessarily mean healthy. Given the choice, I choose organic, especially for things called the dirty dozen: berries, blueberries, cherries, things without skins. If they're not organic, if there's pesticides and herbicides, it can actually sink into the food. So if you look up dirty dozen, those are the ones I would definitely avoid buying conventional. But things like oranges and bananas, they have a peel, so those can be better to have conventional, I would say. But I often like to choose organic, and no added sugar is a good thing if you're buying something that's processed or packaged. But like I said, it could be misleading. You can have organic, organic ice cream, and if you eat a whole tub of it, doesn't mean it's been healthy for you. Same thing, no added sugar doesn't mean there's not sugar in it. I had one patient who was diabetic, and he was telling me that he was having some of the naked juices. Naked juices are a type of juice, and I would say fairly healthy ingredients, but they'll have like bananas and maybe berries and apples and stuff, so a lot of fruit. And he asked me about the naked juices, if they're healthy. And I said, well, they're okay for me, but they're not okay for you because you have diabetes. He said, well, I understand. It says no sugar on it, and that's why I bought it. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. There has to be sugar. There's fruit. And it's sweet, isn't it? He's like, yeah, it is sweet. I'm like, well, there's sugar in it. And what happened was, and I said, what probably it is it because some of them say no added sugar. So there's a lot of sugar from the fruit, but they didn't add extra sugar. Now for him, having diabetes, he wants to limit his sugar, but he especially needs to limit his sugar without fiber, because in studies they've seen that fruit juice is associated with higher diabetes rates. shouldn't be surprising. You drink more fruit juice, more diabetes. But whole fruits are associated with lower diabetes rates. So if you were eating the apple, that would be much better than drinking the juice with apple juice in it. But he saw the no added sugar. He knew that he should avoid sugar, saw no added sugar, but was tricked because it had sugar in it and in a juice form. So it was toxic for him in that case. I would also say avoid artificial sweeteners. My colleagues go gaga over some of the so-called natural low-calorie sweeteners like stevia and like xylitol or monk fruit. There's various sweeteners. I believe that there's no free lunch. The more we try to trick the body, we are not that smart, I don't think. And, you know, we try to trick the body. We try this with Splenda and aspartame. You trick the body, you give the body something sweet so it tastes good, but without calories. So it's the sweetness without the guilt. But we know that this can lead to issues, and one of the things it can do is mess up that microbiome. It can mess up our metabolism. It messes us up physiologically because our brain is used to when something sweet enters our body, our brain recognizes that calories have entered our body, and so it boosts our metabolism. Now, if you remove that, where now you have the sweetness without the calories, it leads to what's called physiologic decoupling. You've removed that cause and effect. Now the sweetness doesn't lead to the increase in metabolism. So next time you have something with any sort of sweetness that has sugar or calories, beyond the other effects that have happened, now you're not getting the boost in metabolism that you were before. So I always say, you know, don't try to pull one over on the body. Don't try to trick it. Some stevia is okay, but don't overdo it, and also don't get lulled into this false sense of security, like, oh, I can use as much stevia as I can now. I don't believe it. And I'm also, unless you have diabetes, but even then, you know, I usually tell people, if you're going to have something sweet, have something sweet, have sugar, just face it, admit it. You want something sweet. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially if it's something that's a whole food, like fruit. A lot of times when we crave sugars, eating some grapes or an apple or watermelon or something will do the trick. So yeah, don't hide from it unless you have a serious reason why, but always keep things in balance. It's my recommendation. And if you're going to select a packaged food, you know, I think most of us get packaged food either here and there or a lot. If you have a choice, choose the one with the simpler ingredients list. If it's got 30 things and you can't read most of them, I don't think that's a good sign. But if it's got a few ingredients and they're all foods, like for example, if you're going to have a health food bar, I'd rather the one that it's got dates and some cane sugar and chocolate and peanut butter and, you know, coconut. It's got like 5 things and they're all foods, versus the one that has different isolates and gums and this and that. I would choose the one that has a simpler list with foods that are recognizable and that you can read. All right, let's talk about fiber. Fiber is one of the more important aspects of a whole food, plant-based diet. And most Americans on the standard American diet, the acronym is SAD, and I don't think that's, I think that's a really good acronym for the standard American diet. It's very SAD. It tends to be low in fiber, very low in fiber. And having low fiber is linked to heart issues, cholesterol issues, diabetes, gut issues, weight issues, a lot of stuff linked to fiber. American Heart Association is big on people getting fiber. The general recommendations are at least 25 grams per day. I don't get caught up in the numbers. We'll talk about some numbers just to give you a sense of what that means. But that's the numbers that people, that's the kind of, I guess, the lower limit of what you want to get. you have soluble and insoluble fiber. We're not going to really go into that too much. Soluble means that it will attract water, tends to slow down digestion, allow things to absorb. I think like bananas. And then insoluble fiber, oats are another good example. Insoluble fiber doesn't attract water. That tends to be roughage, like leafy greens will provide insoluble fiber. That's going to tend to push things through. So whether you want to speed up or slow down digestion, you can eat one of more or the other. Fiber includes prebiotics. So probiotics are the healthy bugs that can be used to populate the gut. Prebiotics are the food for those bugs. So not only is it good to take in the bugs, but you want to feed those bugs too so they can live and survive. So prebiotics, a lot of your fiber, especially the oligosaccharides, type of non-digestible carbohydrate, it's not food for us. We can't break it down, but the bacteria within us can, and it breaks it down so that it's food for them. They get to live, and a lot of times they will produce things, byproducts from that food. They have waste products that become food for us. And so it's a synergistic relationship. As mentioned, some of the things fiber can do: lowers the risk of heart disease, stroke, and hypertension, improves blood sugar, and control in type 2 diabetes, associated with lower BMI, so the body mass index, lowers weight, decreases total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. LDL is the so-called bad cholesterol. HDL is the good cholesterol. Fiber can lower that bad cholesterol. And it's also associated with lower rates of digestive issues like heartburn, ulcers, diverticulitis, constipation, and hemorrhoids. Fiber is really important. Now, when you're changing your fiber intake, just know that sometimes digestion, when you're making changes to your diet, your digestion may change, and it's not always seeming like a good change at first. Because one of the things is that the bugs within you will need to adapt and change, and you'll modify what's in there based on what you're eating. So if you make a big dietary change, the bugs within you are going to be changing, and sometimes there's a process, and your bowels may change in regularity, or you may feel a little more constipated or more loose stool. Different things can happen as your body is adjusting. Another reason why it's good to work with a professional that can determine whether it's because you're not doing it properly, maybe you're not eating enough of something or eating too much of something, or because it's just the body's finding a new balance, it's finding a new homeostasis, and it's working out the kinks to get there. When I made a big shift towards being a much bigger shift to plant-based, my bowels were messed up for a couple of weeks, 2 to 3, and difficulty eliminated, which seems like the opposite. Even eat these big salads, just think I'm going to push everything through, and still was not able to push it through, and it was tough. It was uncomfortable. And granted, I think it's because I made a really big change suddenly. It wasn't terrible, but it was surprising that it would, I would think with all the fiber I was eating that I would be much more regular. But it took, like I said, 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then digestion was much improved after that. Because even before it wasn't great, but then after, it wasn't great before, got worse, and then after it was much, much better. So let's look at some examples of fiber in whole foods. Fiber you're going to get from plants. We don't get it from meat. So a cup of raspberries is 8 grams of fiber. An apple is 5.5 if you keep the skin on. A banana is 3. Broccoli is 5. A cup of brown rice cooked is 3.5. A cup of oatmeal is 5 grams. A cup of black beans is 10 grams. A cup of almonds, if you want some nuts, is going to be 3.5, and a cup of lentils is 15.5 grams of fiber. So remember, the minimum that most of us are shooting for is 25 grams So if you have a cup of oats, a cup of oatmeal with a cup of raspberries in the morning, that's half of your fiber right there. If you have some black beans for lunch, maybe half a cup of black beans with a cup of brown rice, you have almost another 10 there. You've just about hit your mark. So it's if you're eating plants, then shouldn't have too big of a problem to get enough fiber. And like I said, it's not something that I personally count. I eat mostly plants. I eat all plants, really. So fiber is not my concern to the point where I need to track it or count it as I go throughout the day. But as you see, the main categories: fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes like beans, and nuts and seeds. So if you're eating plenty of these throughout the day, and you don't have to be all plant-based, but just make sure that with your meals that you're not avoiding the plants. Don't just eat the meat and the dairy or the eggs. Make sure you're getting plants in there too. And even if you don't like plants, a lot of times if you prepare it differently or just as your palate changes, you can really like plants. Some of the most delicious meals I've had are plant-based meals. But too often if someone's making a transition from eating a standard diet to eating a plant-based diet, it's just like, just a raw salad with nothing on it, just lettuce. And yeah, no one likes that. But if you're making meals that taste good, then you're going to want to do it more. I went to visit my friend recently, and I made some baked and floured cauliflower with buffalo sauce on it. And so cauliflower buffalo wings, I think they taste better than chicken wings. And whenever I miss chicken wings, I remind myself that it's really not the chicken I miss, because I was never a fan of chicken. It was the buffalo sauce that I really missed. And so you can make that with cauliflower or other vegetables. So you don't have to have boring plant-based foods. You can make things that are really delicious. And a lot of it comes down to how you season and sauce it. And we'll talk about seasoning here coming up soon. And finding ways to, at least to start, just putting plants into your food somewhere. If you're gonna have a hamburger, make sure you put plenty of lettuce, maybe a tomato, some onions. If you're making smoothies, fruit smoothies, put a little handful of spinach in there too. You're not even gonna taste it. So if you need to start by hiding plants, oatmeal was the example I used before. My oatmeal, I have oats. I also put in some quinoa because I'm not a huge fan of quinoa by itself. So I'll just hide it in other things. So I'll put like 2/3 oats and 1/3 quinoa. Quinoa has a good amount of protein, and so it's very healthy. And I'm also going to put in blueberries and cherries and sometimes nuts. So just putting in more plants to so you don't have to eat some boring one-dimensional meal. All right, fermented foods. Fermented foods have healthy bacteria, and its fermentation was to preserve them foods, but also have really good effects on our microbiome and our overall health. Our culture and society has moved away from fermentation, especially since we have refrigerators and freezers and other preservatives that have extended the shelf life of food to where we no longer need fermentation to preserve foods like our ancestors did in the past. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't come without negative health consequences. And not only does fermentation preserve the food, but it also preserves our gut health. Some examples here: pickled vegetables like pickles, but also pickled ginger. We're going to talk about ginger here coming up, but there's all sorts of vegetables that can be pickled. Yogurt, which is fermented dairy, but they also have non-dairy forms like fermented coconut yogurt. So there are non-dairy forms of yogurt that are becoming more popular. Kefir, which is it's like a yogurt drink. I'll be honest, I little too sour for me. It's not my type of flavor. So I'm more towards the pickled veggies or the miso or tempeh, which are lower in the list. But some people really like the kefir. If you like kefir, you try these things out. And maybe it takes, if it's not completely revolting, maybe after a couple times you try it, you develop a taste for it. That happens. But at the same time, you don't have to have all of these. I really don't like kefir. So I used to put it in my smoothie to try to sneak it in, but I don't. And then I haven't been having dairy anyway. So miso, if you like miso soup, I love miso soup. That's a way that's fermented. And so you can get some good probiotics in with that. Tempeh is also like miso, but it's a type of fermented soy. So if you heard of health benefits of soy, the soy is a good source of plant-based protein. One of the issues with going completely plant-based is making sure you have enough protein. It's not particularly difficult if you know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing, then you can be really deficient in protein. Soy is one of a decent source, even though it has phytoestrogens. There's still debate how much of that is good and if they're healthy and in what amount. But tempeh is fermented soy, and based on the scientific studies and the literature, the fermented soy is where you have a lot of the health benefits related to certain cancers, cardiovascular disease, etc. The fermentation makes the soy so much healthier for you. And maybe it has to do with its effect on the microbiome. Not exactly sure. Point is that the fermented tempeh and other forms of fermented soy like miso and natto are really healthy and healthier than the original form. And then lastly, vinegar, and I'm a fan of apple cider vinegar. When I talked about digestive sluggishness, apple cider vinegar can be really good. So if you feel like you're not digesting your food properly, a shot of apple cider vinegar can do wonders. It can be before, during, or after your meal. It's strong. It's really strong. So if you're not used to the taste, you might want to water it down a bit. 50-50 water and vinegar. You can also put in a little bit of honey to sweeten it up. I will either water it down a little bit or just take it straight. It can be strong, but it's not the worst thing, and some people like it, especially people that like vinegar. I remember one time when I woke up, I mentioned that feeling like there's food that's just a rock just sitting there. I woke up one night, hours after I went to sleep, and my stomach was hurting, and it felt like the food had never left my stomach that I'd eaten hours and hours before. So I got up and I took a shot of apple cider vinegar, and within 15 minutes, I just felt things were happening. I didn't feel that discomfort anymore. It was still there, but the stomach was kind of gurgling a little bit. Things were moving, and that extreme discomfort was gone within 15, 20 minutes, and I can go back to sleep. It just seemed like it kick-started my digestion, and that's what I needed. So this is one thing that I'll recommend to people who feel like their stomach is a little sluggish and they're not digesting things properly. Now, you don't want to have to rely on something like this or anything to digest properly, but it can help stimulate digestion and get things, kick-starting it so it starts to work better. All right, I'm going to talk now about 3 herb spices that I'm a huge fan of. I drink these a lot, and you can easily incorporate these into your lifestyle. It doesn't have to be every day, but it can be several days a week. Could just be as needed, but I always have these on hand. Now, peppermint, I have the dried leaves. Ginger, I have powder, and I also have dried root. But you can buy ginger fresh from the store. You can buy peppermint, also fresh leaves from the store. You can also have a peppermint herb plant that grows peppermint. And then fennel, I have the seeds and the powder at my home, and you can use these. There's a lot of ways to use them. So you can use them as powders and capsules. You can use them in your food for seasoning, or you can make them into teas. And the great thing about addressing the GI tract is that what you eat is going to go right to the GI tract. So if you're using fennel or peppermint or ginger to aid the digestive tract, well, when you eat it, that's where it's going. So let's talk about some of the benefits of each of these, the GI benefits and the whole body benefits. Ginger. Ginger's an amazing herb, very well studied, a lot of things that it does. It's spicy, so you don't want to overdo it, because then it can be very hot and a little too spicy. I'll be honest, I was never that crazy about the flavor alone, but over time I've learned to like it because it's really good for my body in particular. Starting in med school, I realized that if I started to feel cold inside my body, like a shiver, then there was a chance I was going to get sick. And for whatever reason, I was playing around with ginger, and I started to get cold, and I took a few bites of ginger to warm myself up, and I didn't get sick. And that's something I kept doing time and time again, and been able to stave off a lot of colds and flus by using ginger. Ginger we can see on, well, I didn't put any of the antimicrobial effects, but it's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, which means it's going to reduce the free radical damage. Free radicals are going to go around and damage our cells and our DNA, but when we have antioxidants, it stops that process, so it's going to stop the internal damage. Ginger also has anti-tumor and anti-ulcer effects. Reduces pain, really good pain reliever, especially related to inflammation. So it's not necessarily like a acute pain reliever, but if you have pains that are linked to inflammation, low-grade chronic inflammation, this could be joint pain. Ginger is really good for joint pain. It can reduce that, but also gut pain as well. Ginger is going to improve insulin sensitivity and hemoglobin A1C in type 2 diabetics, so it's going to help their blood sugar, and it can also lower total cholesterol and LDL. As far as the GI stuff, it's going to help with digestion. And so if there's any cramping, gas, or bloating linked to not digesting properly, it's going to help with that. It can increase the motility of the gut, so it's going to get things moving. Again, if you feel like it's just stuck, then some GI can warm things up and get the process going. And ginger is also really good for nausea and vomiting. That's one of the things that it's used for. So for people that feel nausea, even for morning nausea in pregnant women, ginger can help with that as well. And sometimes there's different causes of nausea, but sometimes, especially in my experience, that's one of the things that will go along if ever I feel like the food isn't being processed properly and it's just sitting there, I'll feel nauseous, and the ginger can help. Peppermint has similar effects as ginger, but it's more of a cooling herb. It's got that cooling peppermint mentholy flavor. In the gut, it's going to be more relaxing. It's going to soothe muscle and can reduce diarrhea. It can reduce pain, including abdominal pain, and it also reduces nausea. Like ginger, it's an antioxidant, so it can reduce DNA damage and fat oxidation. So it's going to reduce that damage that can lead to functional problems throughout the body. It's also a pretty powerful antimicrobial agent against bacteria, yeast, and parasites. So it can assist the microbiome in the gut in keeping bad pathogens at bay. And also, and both of these work really well in tea. Peppermint tea and ginger tea. It's part of why I included them. Fennel as well, is that they're very easy to use and also easy to come by, because there's different ways to make tea. We can talk about that in a bit. Some are a little more labor intensive, while others you just get the bag and then you're good to go. And then fennel's a little more soothing to the gut, so it can reduce ulcer formation. It's also going to stimulate digestion to reduce the gas and bloating and improve indigestion if you're having any of that. It can alleviate the abdominal pain. And we're seeing patterns, right? We're seeing digestive benefits, but also those whole body benefits, a lot related to metabolism and also immunity. So it's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, antimicrobial, can reduce blood sugar and diabetes, can reduce hypersensitivity reactions, so allergic type reactions. It's also good for the mind, can reduce stress and anxiety, and decrease total cholesterol, LDL, and your fats, your triglycerides. A lot of other herbs and spices. We did not even scratch the surface. Dozens and dozens of different herbs and spices. This is where you do want to work with someone if you're going to get really into it, because it's an art to know how to combine things, and because some will be more warming, some will be more cooling, and you don't want something, if you have active reflux, heartburn, may not be the best time for something really spicy. You may want something more soothing, like a licorice at the bottom. Licorice is really good for heartburn. Chamomile, also soothing and relaxing to the gut if you have cramping or abdominal pain. But things like turmeric can be good for the inflammation in the gut. It can also help stimulate gut function a little bit as well, but it's definitely going to help with the inflammation. Cinnamon is a great one for diabetes and blood sugar. So I recommend, if you have blood sugar issues and you have some oats, then put some cinnamon on it. It's going to help control your blood sugar. Cardamom as well, I believe too. I'll put cinnamon and cardamom in my oats, or if I'll have some little Ayurvedic formula to have some, milk. I use coconut milk warmed up, spice it with some cardamom, a little bit of black pepper, and some maple syrup, not too much. And it's a really delicious and healthy drink. It's good, good rejuvenating drink. A really simple tea, if you get ginger powder and fennel powder, let's talk about the ones we were going over previously. If you want to get some of those in your diet, you can just get the powder and then put it in a cup and warm water. Very easy to make. So just like a mug, like a 10-ounce mug, give or take. I usually eyeball it, but yesterday, just to try it out, I put a quarter of a teaspoon of powdered fennel and a quarter of a teaspoon powdered ginger, dry ginger and dry fennel. And then, like 10 ounces, give or take, of hot water. Just make sure you stir it up. It was a little spicy, but it wasn't overwhelming. But maybe you would use a fifth of a teaspoon instead of a quarter, because it's the ginger that's going to be the spicy one. But a quarter teaspoon of each ginger and fennel. It's going to have some of the warmth, but some of the soothing nature of both of those herbs, and it would be great for digestion. It's very easy to make. And the herbs themselves are relatively, if you buy them powdered, especially if you buy them in bulk, but like, for example, natural grocers, they'll have a lot of powdered herbs. You get them for pretty cheap. The powdered fennel, I think, is just like you get a nice size bag for like $3. Ginger's maybe a little bit more expensive, but probably not too much. I forgot the exact price. But you can do things, you can do a lot with the herbs and the teas, and do it simply. If you wanted to step your game up, then you can I use a French press for my slightly larger batches, and I'll get you a couple cups. But powdered herbs are a great way to get the herb in, and it's going right in the GI tract. So you get to, it's going to coat it. Another thing that's common, and you may have noticed this in if you've been to Indian buffet, they don't have those anymore, but the fennel, those sometimes have fennel seeds at the exit. So on your way out, you can have some fennel and chew on it to help with digestion. So just chewing on fennel seeds is another way. There's all sorts of ways to get in these powerful, I call nature's pharmaceuticals, herbs and spices. Okay, we're getting to the end here, and then we'll have time for questions. Lifestyle is important. This, we can go over all sorts of stuff with this, but I don't think it's, I think more and more people are recognizing that healthy lifestyle is important. And not only does the gut affect everything in the body, everything you do affects the gut. So drinking water is going to be important, especially as you eat more fiber. You don't have to necessarily have the water with your meals, but if you take like a fiber supplement, they usually recommend drinking a nice tall glass of water to just help push it through, help get that through. But having enough water is going to ensure that you stay regular. Reduction. It's tough to overstate this. Stress does a real number on the gut. Not only the cells of the gut, but the microbes in the gut as well. And we live in a high stress society. Not only stress about worry, but stress as in living not naturally, whether it's, not eating the right foods could be a stress, not getting to bed at the right time. You might get enough sleep, but not the right time. Stress on our eyes and bodies. We always have screens around us. We're looking at screens right now. There's a lot of different stressors that are, that add up, and we may not always acknowledge them as stressors, may not feel like a panic attack, but it could still be stress on the body. So actively having some sort of practice in reducing stress consciously is, I think, crucial. It's not just about, well, I didn't, lose my mind today, and so I wasn't that stressed out. No, even every day we should always be consciously, proactively reducing stress and relaxing. And that could be meditation, but it could be, meditation is good. Breathing exercise is another way to reduce stress. There's a lot of ways to reduce stress, but I would caution you against, I watch TV to relax. It's not fully relaxing. Relaxation is actually a surprisingly active process. I'm a big fan of meditation and breathing exercises to calm the body. It can be tough to get in the habit, and it can be very easy to avoid, but very good for the body. And if you felt what a good meditation session feels like, not even a great one, but just a decent one, just doing some breathing, then you've probably recognized the difference between being not stressed and being really relaxed. Being relaxed is a whole nother state. Sleep, big part of our rest and digest. General recommendation is 8 hours. Going to bed for most of us by 10, and then getting around 8 hours plus or minus 1. Some people need more, some people need less. And also good quality. It's not just the quantity, it's the quality. Some things to help the quality: not eating before bed, at least a couple hours before bed. Staying away from screens and excess stimulation right before bed. So, doing a meditation practice, reading a book, these things are okay, but, not going on Facebook and getting stressed out right before you try to sleep. And then exercise is good, to your ability. Exercise is amazing for digestion. And if that's even just breathing exercises, the breathing itself, the diaphragm, when it's expanding, when it's when it's contracting, it will push into the abdomen and help massage it, and that pumping effect will lead to blood going in and going out, and it's really, really healthy for digestion. It's also relaxing. So, based on your physical ability, exercise is great. And if what you have available, and most of what you have available, are breathing exercises, then do that. That can be incredibly helpful as well. Okay, just going to go over some things that you can do, some things to think about. One that you can do right now is a diet diary. Extremely powerful in patients. And I always have people do a diet diary. It used to be for me, but now it's for them, because it is helpful information for me. I can see what they're eating. I can see what they're not eating, and get a good view. Because diet recall, if you just think about what you ate, not always accurate. But if you write it down and you look at what you ate, it can really blow your mind, especially if you're writing down certain symptoms that you have and how you feel. Then you can start to make the connection. I have a lot of people that come in and they'll say, you know what, I noticed that when I eat this thing happens. And so now now you're empowered with information that you can use to eat the right foods. And if it's you figuring it out versus some doctor telling you, chances are you're going to listen to it more because because it's your body. There are ways to do a microbiome analysis like through the stool. So you can get it tested to see what microbes are considered out of balance, what dysbiotic features you have. And some of them will even say what sort of pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals can be used to help keep the ones in check that you have too much of. Food allergy panels can be useful, not always necessary, but in some cases, our body is responding to foods that's causing inflammation. And then you take them out of the diet, help the gut, heal it. And then a lot of times you can add the foods back in and the symptoms are gone. Other people just do an elimination diet, take out the things that will often cause gut irritation and issues and inflammation. And then as, again, that inflammation goes down, once the inflammation goes away, then the healing can finish and be completed. And then once that gut lining is healthy, the inflammation's gone, the microbiome is healthy, now the body can respond and react to foods better and actually process them correctly. Acupuncture can be amazing for digestion, which may be surprising to you, if only because of the role that it plays in stress and relaxation. If you haven't had acupuncture before, not everyone would agree with this statement, but it always amazes me how many people are really relaxed when they get needles in them. They're tiny needles, so it's not like a blood draw. They generally don't hurt. You generally don't feel them at all. But that's the number one thing I hear people say when they get acupuncture is they couldn't believe how relaxed they felt and that they either fell asleep or could have fallen asleep, which for a lot of people blows their mind. They would never think that would be the case with having needles put in them. There are various gut health supplements, nutrients, but also herbs. And this is where you also want to, it's important to know what medications you're on and what conditions you have to see which could be the best and what should be avoided. So yeah, when it gets to supplements on top of like culinary herbs and spices and teas, when it's like specific individualized approaches, that's when I think better to just do it the right way with a professional. And you work with a professional, you learn things, you incorporate things, and then you get to take control of your health. But of course, there are other tests and treatments that may require an integrative approach using standard medical tests and treatments and also more holistic ones. There is a role in combining, and depending on the situation, the condition, the person, they may need more conventional and just use holistic in an integrative or adjunct manner. Or in some cases, all they need is the holistic and they don't need the conventional approach. But that's again where working with your physician or physicians and coming up with the plan that's right for you, because not everyone will have the same plan. All right, 5 simple things to close it out. So if you take nothing else from this, we covered a lot. There's a lot of information in here. And so let's simplify it. First of all, remember that gut health relates to the health of the rest of your body. And arguably, most diseases start in the gut. That's what some people would say. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong. Gut plays a huge role, fundamental role in a lot of chronic diseases, and even some acute diseases and infections are linked to previous gut health. But these are 5 things that I would say, if nothing else, to walk away with these, or at least one of these. Number 1, eat whole foods, mostly plants. Stay away from the processed junk and things that have been changed and adulterated. Eat the whole food. Drink teas and use herbs and spices. Huge fan of tea. I drink tea daily. If that's one thing you add into your life, is maybe some ginger tea or peppermint tea, or just getting in the habit of making tea and just steeping a bag, that could be phenomenal. Or just being more mindful of using more spices and herbs with your foods. I think we've come away from that, a lot of us, and eat bland foods that are either sweetened or have hot sauce, but we don't always use the other culinary spices, which, I mean, we didn't talk about basil and oregano, so many healthy ones. So use more of those in your food. You can start a diet diary and just to improve your awareness of how what you eat affects how you feel. Relaxing and reducing stress. It's just a part of life that stress is everywhere, especially in today's world. But it's something that even if you don't feel like you're on the verge of a meltdown, there's still stress in there. We all have it. And so having a consistent practice where you reduce stress and relax can be tremendously helpful for your entire body and your mind, and especially the gut. And again, if you feel any sort of resistance to this, like I'm just trying to drum up patients, I just love giving speeches here. Don't come to me then, but work with the health professional, especially if you have serious things going on. You have different diseases, you're on different medications. Work with someone, because the way I see it is, if you work with someone, especially that's going to teach you things and teach you how to incorporate healthy actions into your lifestyles, healthy foods, healthy herbs and spices, you work with that person so that you can get on the right track, but also so that you can learn how to take care of yourself, versus trying to learn by yourself and not knowing the big picture and maybe making mistakes and then having to go into someone because something happened. So if work with a professional, to stay safe, but also work with someone who's going to teach you so that you can live healthier and better, so that you don't have to go to them as much. Because if the better you can take care of your own health, then the less you will have to see those other professionals. And I'm a huge fan of the empowerment, because I always tell my patients, I like to see you, but also would rather, it's better for both of us if you can live healthy and not need me until something comes up. I'd rather you live your life and spend your money on other things rather than me. So that's it for this speech. Thank you all for being such a great audience. I hope it was beneficial, and I'd like to open the floor to questions. Whatever you have, I'd like to help answer them.
Questions, anyone? I know everybody's always shy about asking.
It's a small group too.
Yeah. Don't be bashful. Oops.
So now, what happens if, can your stomach, if it's off balance, can it produce way too much acid?
Yeah, that's possible.
Your gut?
It can produce too much acid, and especially if with like H. pylori, that's one connection with that. Sometimes when people have heartburn, it's from not enough acid, where the opening or essentially the door that goes from the esophagus to the stomach isn't shut. And so it's not enough acid, the door doesn't shut, so acid can leak out, and that's when people get some heartburn. So in that case, more acid could actually help close the door, but there are cases where people can make too much acid, yeah.
And I've suffered with that for years.
Yeah, that's something my mom was getting a lot of heartburn, and for her, it started as a cough. She had a cough because of the irritation in her esophagus.
Mm-hmm.
And she's wondering, why do I have this cough? Well, it's because she had this low-grade reflux over time that she didn't really feel as much, but then it started to get worse. And I gave her a DGL extract, a licorice extract. It's called DGL. And she would take that. I said, you know what, just take it. I think I started her off on maybe a couple times a day. And then over a few weeks, then I told her just take it when needed. And then she stopped getting the reflux, and the cough went away. So licorice is nice and soothing. Not the best taste if you're like me. I don't really like it.
Not a licorice fan.
Yeah. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
But for her, she didn't hate it, and it got the job done. I take some licorice too. I'll put it in my teas, but not too much. I try to keep it at a dose where that I don't taste it that much.
Yeah. I know I do capsules with lemon, lavender, and peppermint. They kind of help when my asthma is real bad and allergies.
Yeah, a strong anti-inflammatory.
course, taste the peppermint for a little while, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's not as bad as the
Yeah. Oh, then mix it with a little coconut oil too.
that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't take them straight. I put them in a little vegetable, some kind of capsule. I think they're vegetable.
Vegetable capsule, yeah. And the coconut oil will be nice and soothing too.
Yeah. Yep. And it
Questions
does help. So,
Are there questions about certain herbs or spices or how to incorporate them into your daily lives or tea?
My name's Michael Sullivan. I've been a quad for almost 40 years. So I was injured when I was 20, and so I can remember before I was going to school, right after I became a quad, and I lived in DC. So in the wintertime, I would drink a lot of the teas. They're called celestial herb teas. And so it would be peppermint, chamomile, or just a variety of teas. And I found that that was pretty effective in terms of, you know, calming me down or improving improving my gut health or reducing stress. But also, but more recently, as I've aged, I've been having health issues, especially into my late 50s. So I'm about in several weeks. About to go for what's called a ESWL treatment for my kidneys to break up some kidney stones. So at this point, I'm not sure, because I've been having so many gut issues. I'm not sure if it's the kidney stones, because I'm a quad and I'm complete, that I can't feel below in my gut area enough to really discern, you know, what's really causing that issue. So I'm hoping that at least by process of elimination, I'll eliminate perhaps the physical types of things, and then hopefully that gets rid of it. But if not, obviously, some of the stuff that you spoke about today is useful in a lot of different ways in terms of. So I was aware of like eating healthier, and I've been doing that. And I was, you know, the plant-based stuff is really coming up strong in terms of from a scientific standpoint, in terms of being a healthier way of life, in terms of improving your day-to-day life, but long-term avoiding any kind of major you know, issues like diabetes, etc., congestive heart failure. You know, I'm like anybody else. I'm in between. I haven't gone completely plant-based or anything, but I try to do the best that I can to follow a lot of what you said in your presentation.
Excellent. I believe health is about balance. And so I don't push people to go 100% plant-based. I may say that you know, maybe for certain conditions, it could be useful to go on a, you know, eliminate meat for a certain amount of time. But I think if you're getting at least a lot of plants in your diet, I'm big on just put in the healthy stuff. And I don't generally tell people that they have to eliminate meat, because the main thing is getting in the nutrients in the plants. So and I'm big on balance. So as long as you're getting that healthy stuff in, yeah, I don't think for most people it's a requirement to completely go completely plant-based or to be perfect about the diet.
Right.
And that's, you know what, I'm glad you mentioned the celestial teas, because even though you know, I'm a little maybe fanatical about teas and herbs and stuff with that. I make my own. I make my own capsules. I do all sorts of stuff with them. But so I don't drink the bag teas. They're still a valid option. And considering how easy it is, you just have the bag right there. You get warm water in it, steep it for a bit, and start drinking it. it's even those pre-bagged teas can be incredibly beneficial for how you feel, both in your mind, but also physically. And reminds me of a patient recently, who very young patient, and he didn't drink the teas at first, but he had the tea, and he's like, oh my God, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. Like my mind, but also he had some gut issues. He said his gut felt so much better, and he was blown away that a tea could do that. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you mentioning that.
I mean, essentially what also drove me to that decision was, being a quad and being young, not wanting, not being able to, um, wanting to stay um, as healthy and as well as not gain a lot of weight, as well as, have issues with my teeth or whatever. Um, it was more of a practical thing being a quad, because it was something that I could do where I could take a pitcher of water, put some tea bags in it, put it in the microwave, and then heat it up in the microwave, and then take it out and stick a long straw in it.
Mhm.
And I could sit there instead of just, I got tired of drinking, tons of water all the time. And especially in DC, where it's not like Arizona, where it's in January and February, it's like 30 degrees outside or 40 degrees at best. So, it kept my weight under control, kept my teeth relatively healthy, and all the side benefits I've learned subsequently through, stuff that was proved that I didn't even know about then. Other than, the ads that they would put on, chamomile about, if you if you drank chamomile tea, that was like a kind of like a relaxing type of tea.
Promote sleep.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually another good thing to mention of drinking the tea as a way to not overeat, because sometimes when we eat, we're hungry because we're actually thirsty. And another element, and I definitely noticed this personally in Arizona, even in the summer, if I drink too much just plain water, I feel like I urinate more than what I drink. And drinking either a tea or water with lime or a little bit of salt, like some substance in the water, helps my body retain it even better. And like you mentioned, that sometimes it's can satiate my appetite too, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. No, the one last point I want to make, and let other people speak, is I've gone overboard to that fact. Being, drinking too much water or liquids, and really putting adding a lot of vegetables and watermelons and cantaloupes and all the other stuff. You can go overboard with that stuff and end up with a sodium issue where you don't really get enough sodium. So I would never, almost all my life, because I had a grandparent that had high blood pressure. So I never put salt on my food. I never added it to my food. And but because I didn't do that, and I started following, like what you said, what you mentioned earlier, sometimes like you mess around with your diet too much, you can go overboard in the other way and then affect your body. And I ended up in the hospital a couple of times, really low. So I'm still seeing a nephrologist for that. So, and we're still trying to keep it under control, because subsequently over the long term, it's become a more of a chronic thing with me, with having low sodium. And so I've really got to watch what I drink, and be careful about those things. So, I'm not getting no salt legumes at all.
Well, I think, I mean, salt definitely salt's maligned in the health field, and for the role it plays in health and cardiovascular disease, but also because the standard American diet tends to be high in salt. But if you're eating a lot of plants, those are going to be higher in potassium and not as high in salt. And so if you're eating plant-based, you don't have to be afraid of salt. And yeah, for me, and also for you, I actually seek to put in some salt into my diet, and that helps me versus the other way around. So
Yeah,
that's
so that I've done the same thing, get some sea salt or whatever, and just add that to some of my food so that I'm getting sodium that I need, but also eating healthy in terms of the minerals and vitamins that I need. And I'm looking to get to a place where hopefully this procedure I'm going to have is going to correct the pain that I've had, because if it hasn't, then I may have some gut issues that you've been talking about in your presentation that I could have to resolve. That could be the basis of it. We'll just wait and see.
yeah. We'll hope the procedure takes care of things.
Yeah, if not, then we go to plan B, and perhaps I'll be talking to you or someone else about how to, and as well as my doctors about, what could be the potential issues there in terms of that area.
Well, pain or not, definitely try out on the teas and the spices, and let your doctors know too. But I'm big on the teas and spices. I have them even without issues, or
Right.
they're just a part of my life now.
Yeah, I've gotten away from the tea, so after your presentation, also I've learned a lot more about how they impacted some of the ways of increasing your probiotics in your body, in your gut.
Excellent. Oh, that's the best thing you could say is you're more excited about teas.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
I know I love iced tea.
Iced tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't drink. I've tried hot tea, just plain, and I just can't. I
Yeah.
can't.
The temperature, the flavor.
Pardon me?
The temperature or flavor?
The flavor. I always have to put in a little bit of flavored creamer.
I'll tell you what, one thing that really helped me, and my parents loved it, is some hibiscus. It's got a fruity flavor, but it's not sweet at all. It's actually your blood sugar too. So it's the opposite of sweet. It's got a fruity flavor.
I'll have to try it.
I did the same thing with the herbal teas for a while, even in the summer, because it's hot and humid in DC. So I had to get my fluid. So I would just heat it up and then just let it cool down and throw some ice in with it, and you'd have a flavored drink that didn't have any sugar or processed stuff in it. I didn't add any, additives like stevia or any other thing, and it was, at least it wasn't water. It was something flavored other than water.
Right.
Yeah, water, just plain water. I drink. That's all I drink all day long.
Yeah. That got a little too much for me for a while.
Yeah, yeah, it does. But, well, cool. Any more questions? Sharon, I don't know if she's here. I know she had a sporting thing to go to. Oh, she is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Joy, did you have any questions? Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sharon.
I'm good. Is there any particular teas that you would recommend for UTI?
Well, there are various herbs that can be good, like uva ursi is one. It depends on the cause, and I know particularly with with this group, there are more sometimes mechanical causes of the UTIs.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as there are certain teas that sometimes they're like UTI blends that you can go towards. And of course, the big ones for UTIs, people really like cranberries and D-mannose are two really useful supplements. But some people can't have the cranberry supplement because of concerns over like blood clotting. So, getting to the individualized aspect can get a little more, nuanced and detailed. But there are some herbs that can be useful for, at the very least, immune support, but in other cases, the urinary tract support as well. But
Okay.
with having a catheter and stuff, that's going to have an added, element. Let's say for
Sure.
that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people use the D-mannose.
Yeah. I mean, I already use D-mannose, and I do recommend that to other people. Plus, there is some cranberry supplements that have D-mannose in it, but I didn't know if there was any drinking like TUIs. That would be another alternative that I could suggest to people.
Yeah, there are some specific UTI blends. Now, I would say that I could imagine something like ginger being useful
Yeah.
because of its impact on the immune system. And so some of those immune boosting teas can also be helpful. But yeah, I'm trying to think of, there's an herb shop that I'll go to sometimes. It's on Warner and Alma School. And it's, why am I blanking on the name? Shoot, it was right there. But anyway, I'm pretty sure they have a UTI blend actually there. And if not, I also think that the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, the medicinary, I believe, also has a UTI blend. And so it's, again, I always say talk to your doctors first, just to make sure they're in the loop. But those are, they have blends that would be a little more, let's say, a little more medicinal and targeted for the urinary tract.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming, Sharon.
Good questions. Anyone else? Nope. Guess not. I just said Bueller, but he's not here. So. Bueller. Well, thank you, Dr. Clough. It was very informative, and I'll send it anybody the recording if they want it.
Yeah, you can send it to me, Karen.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, send it over. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Karen. And
absolutely, thank you.
Who's here right now or watching later. I really enjoy speaking with this group and providing whatever options and alternatives that I can to help out. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah,
thank you, Dr. Clough, for taking your time.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All righty. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. Let us know if you need anything. I know Girma's through our donation closet to see what supplies we have. So if anybody needs anything.
Well, I'll let you know, but I'm okay.
Okay, awesome. Or if you hear of anybody else that needs anything. I know he did say we have bedside commodes, diapers, power chair, and a manual chair. But he was going to send me a list.
Okay.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
All right, see you.
All right, thank you.